The stage gave him freedom, a way to channel emotions he didn't yet have words for. Acting, even at that age, was never about attention. It was about expression. When his parents divorced, Heath internalized the pain quietly, but it deepened his sensitivity and his ability to observe others. He began studying people, noticing the tiny details that reveal truth, a habit that would later define his acting. Friends remembered him as a thinker and a dreamer, never satisfied with surface-level answers. Perth, though beautiful, began to feel small for a boy whose imagination stretched across continents. By the time he reached his teens, he already knew he was meant to chase something bigger, something boundless. At just 17, Heath made the kind of decision that defines destinies. He packed a few essentials, grabbed his best friend Trevor, and drove across Australia to Sydney. It was a journey filled with uncertainty. Two young dreamers chasing the horizon with nothing but faith and ambition. Sydney was a new world, loud and unforgiving, but Heath threw himself into it. He auditioned relentlessly, faced rejection, and kept going. Small television roles followed. In Sweat, where he played a gay cyclist, and Home and Away, Australia's iconic soap opera. They were modest beginnings, but to Heath, every project was a lesson. He learned patience, discipline, and the quiet art of observation. Those early roles taught him that acting wasn't about performance. It was about transformation. He started to crave complexity, roles that scared him, that forced him to evolve. That hunger, that refusal to settle, became the heartbeat of his career. Hollywood soon came calling. For a young man from Perth, the city was dazzling, sprawling lights, endless opportunities, and the hum of ambition. But Heath didn't arrive with arrogance. He arrived with humility and hunger. Heath Andrew Ledger was not merely an actor. He was a phenomenon, an artist who burned with an intensity that few could comprehend and even fewer could match. From the moment he appeared on screen, there was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, that quiet confidence, that restless energy, that mysterious spark in his eyes. He wasn't content to simply act. He wanted to become the truth behind every character he touched. His performances were alive in a way that felt raw and unpredictable, as if each line and gesture came from a place far deeper than craft. Ledger's story isn't just about fame or talent. It's about a young man from Perth, Australia, who followed his instincts so fiercely that he ended up changing what acting could mean. He saw art as a way to explore chaos and vulnerability, to find something real in a world built on illusion. He chased imperfection because he knew that's where authenticity lived. People were drawn to him not just for his looks or charisma, but because there was something deeply human in the way he existed, both on and off the screen. Every laugh, every pause, every quiet moment carried an honesty that made his work timeless. In a world full of performances, Heath Ledger wasn't pretending to be anyone. He was searching for truth. Heath's story began in the sun-soaked suburbs of Perth, Western Australia, where he was born on April 4th, 1979. His childhood was ordinary in setting, but extraordinary in spirit. His mother, Sally, taught French and filled their home with warmth and books, while his father, Kim, was a race car driver and engineer who embodied drive and determination. Heath inherited a blend of both, his mother's empathy and his father's fire. He spent his days exploring, imagining, and constantly moving, his mind alive with curiosity. When he first stepped on stage as Peter Pan at Guildford Grammar School, something inside him clicked. He landed a part in Two Hands, 1999, a gritty Australian crime drama that earned him critical acclaim back home. Then came the role that changed everything, 10 Things I Hate About You. The film could have been a forgettable teen rom-com, but Heath made it iconic. As Patrick Verona, he was effortlessly magnetic, a rebel with a smirk and a heartbeat. The scene where he serenades Julia Stiles across the school bleachers became an instant classic. Suddenly, Heath Ledger was a global name. Yet fame, for him, was never the goal. Behind the easy charm was an artist searching for depth. Even at 20, he was turning down formulaic scripts that would have made him rich but not fulfilled. He wasn't chasing stardom. He was chasing substance. That choice, brave and unusual, became the foundation of his legacy. In the years that followed, Heath reinvented himself with every role. In The Patriot, 2000, he proved he could match the emotional weight of Mel Gibson, portraying Gabriel Martin with quiet passion and moral conviction. A year later, A Knight's Tale reintroduced him as a medieval hero with swagger and soul, a film that captured his joy and charisma, but also his depth. Yet even amid commercial success, he sought darker, more complex material. He explored vulnerability in Monsters Ball, playing a prison guard trapped in guilt and internal conflict in The Four Feathers. Each film was another experiment, another step towards something truer. Critics began to see what Heath himself had always known, that beneath his charm was a relentless student of humanity, someone who wanted to understand the entire spectrum of human emotion. That search for truth reached its zenith with Brokeback Mountain, 2005. In the role of Ennis Del Mar, Heath found the perfect vessel for his introspection. The film told the story of forbidden love between two men in rural America, a narrative of repression, tenderness, and heartbreak. Heath's performance was breathtaking in its restraint. His silences spoke volumes. Every gesture, every flicker of pain behind his eyes felt real. It wasn't a performance. It was a confession. Critics hailed it as one of the finest portrayals of love and loneliness ever seen. The role earned him his first Academy Award nomination and redefined his career. More importantly, it showed the world the depth of his courage. Not just artistic, but emotional. After Brokeback Mountain, Heath could have easily become Hollywood royalty, but he withdrew from the limelight. He moved to Brooklyn with actress Michelle Williams, his partner from the film, and together they welcomed their daughter, Matilda. Fatherhood softened him, grounded him. Those who knew him said it was the happiest he had ever been. He painted, took photographs, played chess in cafes, and talked about directing one day. Yet even in that peace, his mind never rested. He was constantly creating, sketching storyboards, writing ideas, planning films he would never get the chance to make. His creativity was endless and sometimes overwhelming. He was both fulfilled and restless, content yet haunted by the need to keep evolving. Then came The Dark Knight. When Heath was cast as the Joker, the world was skeptical. But what emerged from that skepticism was nothing short of revolutionary. He locked himself in a hotel room for weeks, keeping a journal in the Joker's voice, experimenting with movement, tone, and madness until the character lived inside him. He invented the Joker's erratic tics, his disquieting voice, his grotesque humor. On set, he was electric, polite between takes, but completely consumed when the cameras rolled. His Joker wasn't just evil. He was elemental, a storm that stripped humanity bare. Christopher Nolan called his work fearless, and it was. Heath had turned one of cinema's most familiar villains into something entirely new, chaos incarnate. But the role that would immortalize him also drained him. Heath struggled with insomnia, taking prescription pills to quiet his mind. He was working non-stop. The Dark Knight, I'm Not There, the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, constantly shifting between realities, never fully at rest. Friends said he seemed exhausted, but still full of plans. He talked about directing, about experimenting with film and music. Then, on January 22nd, 2008, tragedy struck. Heath Ledger was found dead in his New York apartment from an accidental overdose of prescription medication. He was 28 years old. The world stopped. News of his death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. It wasn't just the loss of a great actor. It was the loss of a rare, restless spirit who had only begun to show us what he could do. Months later, The Dark Knight premiered, and audiences finally witnessed the performance that would define him. It was transcendent, terrifying, mesmerizing, utterly unforgettable. Heath Ledger's Joker wasn't just a villain. He was a masterpiece. The Academy Award he received posthumously for Best Supporting Actor was more than recognition. It was a farewell to an artist who gave everything. Even now, Heath Ledger's presence lingers, not as a ghost, but as a light. His work continues to inspire generations of actors who dare to feel deeply and live truthfully through their art. He taught us that real artistry isn't about perfection, it's about courage. He showed that vulnerability is not weakness, but power. In just 28 years, Heath left behind a legacy that others spend lifetimes chasing, one defined by integrity, intensity, and heart. His story remains both heartbreaking and beautiful because it reminds us that art is a fragile miracle, born of passion, risk, and the willingness to be fully alive. Heath Ledger lived for that miracle, and though his life was brief, his impact will never fade. From the earliest days of his life, Heath's creativity reached beyond acting. He was fascinated by rhythm, by the connection between sound, movement, and emotion. As a teenager, he filled sketchbooks with faces, lines, and notes, each one an attempt to capture the inner life behind a pair of eyes. Music was another of his great loves. He'd say that songs helped him see characters more clearly, shaping the emotional color of a performance long before the cameras rolled. His playlists were full of artists like Nick Drake, Tom Waits, and Jeff Buckley, musicians who bled emotion into their craft. Heath admired that rawness, that willingness to stand bare in front of the world. It was the same kind of honesty he sought in acting, imperfect, vulnerable, and real. Art to him was a conversation with the soul, a way to translate feeling into form. Even as a teenager in Perth, he spoke about art like someone decades older, as if he already understood that expression and identity were inseparable. When he first arrived in Los Angeles, the city felt like another planet, dazzling, loud, and strange. Heath had come from a culture that valued humility, and Hollywood's obsession with image clashed with his instinct for authenticity. He admired the artistry, but not the machinery that powered it. He once described fame as a mask everyone wears, and he avoided the social games that came with it. Friends would find him studying film late at night instead of going to parties, taking notes on Brando's quiet intensity or Daniel Day-Lewis's precision. He felt he was there to learn, not to belong. That tension between who he was and who the industry wanted him to be would follow him his entire career, a constant pull between art and expectation. The price of that honesty was heavy. Every role demanded emotional truth, and Heath gave it without hesitation. But he struggled to let go of his characters when the cameras stopped. He once admitted that he carried them with him, that he felt their weight even after the final scene. It wasn't depression in the usual sense. It was empathy that ran too deep. He felt everything, the beauty, the pain, the isolation of being human. It made his art luminous, but his mind restless. Sleep came rarely, peace even less. The very sensitivity that made him extraordinary also left him vulnerable to exhaustion and emotional fatigue. He never complained about it. He just worked through it quietly, privately, as if feeling too much was both his curse and his gift. On the set of Brokeback Mountain, his sensitivity became something sacred. Director Ong Lee often said that Heath led through silence. He didn't try to dominate a scene. He let emotion find him naturally. The way he moved, the pauses between his words, the weight of his glances, they carried a poetry that couldn't be written in a script. When cameras stopped, he remained soft-spoken and kind, offering quiet encouragement to his castmates. It was during this film that he fell deeply in love with Michelle Williams, a bond that mirrored the sincerity and fragility of the story they were telling. Away from set, he would wander through the Wyoming landscape, letting the emptiness and the wind seep into him. Those long, solitary moments helped him understand Mars' loneliness. By the end of production, Heath wasn't acting anymore. He was living the ache of a man trapped between love and fear. That performance stayed with him long after the film wrapped. Heath's vision extended beyond acting. He had already started exploring filmmaking, directing music videos, editing short films, and developing ideas for features. His notebooks were filled with doodles, storyboards, and lines of poetry written in looping handwritten. He wanted to create films that felt like dreams, visual, emotional, and deeply personal. He talked about exploring memory and identity through moving images, wanting to capture the subconscious on film. Friends who saw his sketches said he was building an entire visual language, one that blurred the boundaries between reality and imagination. He was preparing for a new chapter in his creative journey, one that would have made him not just a great actor, but a visionary filmmaker. Yet the pursuit of truth came with relentless pressure. Heath's perfectionism was both inspiring and isolating. He couldn't settle for surface emotion. He needed to understand the inner engine of every scene. Between takes, he'd replay moments in his head, analyzing rhythm, tone, and authenticity. Interviews sometimes made him uncomfortable because he hated defining himself. He preferred mystery to explanation. He knew that true art existed somewhere between control and chaos, and he was constantly trying to find that balance. His process was intense, often leaving him emotionally drained but artistically alive. To watch him work was to see a man in constant dialogue with his own spirit, restless, passionate, searching. After his death, Heath's influence only deepened. His name became synonymous with fearlessness. His performances studied in film schools and acting workshops around the world. Directors referenced him as proof that vulnerability could be more powerful than bravado. His Joker became a blueprint for how a character can transcend genre, how even a comic book villain could hold a mirror to human nature. But beyond the roles, Heath's story started new conversations about the emotional toll of creativity, about the fine line between dedication and destruction, about what it means to live authentically in an industry built on illusion. His life became a reminder that art, when pursued with honesty, demands everything. And yet, Heath Ledger's legacy is not one of sorrow, it's one of light. His work continues to breathe, to inspire, to challenge. It teaches that bravery in art is not about control, but surrender. To watch him on screen is to witness a man unafraid to feel, truly, painfully, beautifully. He showed that every flaw, every uncertainty, could be transformed into something profound. His story lingers not as tragedy, but as proof that those who give themselves completely to creation never truly vanish. They live on in the moments that move us, in the truth that art can still reveal. Heath Ledger remains one of those rare souls who turned his brief life into something eternal. A reminder that authenticity, once found, becomes its own kind of immortality. Heath Ledger's journey through cinema was one of constant evolution, a restless artist searching for authenticity in an industry obsessed with surface. His early roles in Australia had already shown flashes of something different, a sincerity that made even small moments feel electric. He wasn't the kind of actor who performed, he became. When he moved to the United States, he found himself surrounded by noise, but he never lost the quiet fire that defined him. He wanted to make work that mattered. Every film he chose was a reflection of that philosophy. In The Patriot, opposite Mel Gibson, he brought depth to a young soldier's internal conflict, showing emotion that far surpassed what was written on the page. It was one of the first glimpses of his ability to find human truth within archetypes. Then came A Knight's Tale, a film that should have been a simple medieval comedy, but became a heartfelt exploration of identity and aspiration through Heath's charm and sincerity. He had that rare ability to balance playfulness with gravity, to turn even light-hearted roles into something genuine. He was building a career, but more importantly, he was building an artistic identity. Heath always resisted predictability. Fame came easily, but fulfillment did not. When he could have chosen blockbusters, he looked for scripts that frightened him, roles that demanded emotional risk. He believed that fear was a sign he was on the right path. This instinct led him to independent projects like Monsters, Ball, and Candy, where he explored addiction, love, and moral collapse with startling realism. In each performance, he immersed himself so completely that audiences could feel his internal struggle. Off-screen, he was equally creative, constantly writing, sketching, photographing, and experimenting with new ideas. He had a fascination with the psychology of characters and would often journal in the voice of the people he played, building their histories and fears from scratch. Those who worked with him often said he had an energy that filled every room but never felt performative. He wasn't the loudest person on set. He was the most present. Between takes, he'd play chess, talk about music, or quietly observe. There was always something contemplative behind his eyes, as if he was processing the world in ways others couldn't. His collaborators described him as both a free spirit and a perfectionist, an artist who was happiest when he was creating something honest. That intensity, however, came with its own weight. The same empathy that fueled his performances also made him sensitive to the pain of others. He struggled with sleeplessness, often saying that his mind simply wouldn't stop racing. He read constantly philosophy, poetry, art, searching for meaning, for a way to understand the human experience beyond the spotlight. After Brokeback Mountain, Heath's career changed forever. The film had not only earned him acclaim, but also cemented his reputation as a fearless performer. It broke stereotypes, challenged audiences, and proved that vulnerability could be revolutionary. Yet the success brought new pressure. He was celebrated as one of his generation's most gifted actors, but fame had never been his goal. He longed for balance between art and life, intensity and peace. In Brooklyn, he found temporary calm. He built a home that became a sanctuary for creativity, filled with books, art, and music. He painted, edited footage, and spent hours with his daughter Matilda, whose laughter, he said, was his favorite sound in the world. Fatherhood gave him grounding, reminding him of what truly mattered beyond the chaos of Hollywood. When Heath began preparing for The Dark Knight, he treated it like a psychological experiment. He wanted to find the humanity in madness, to strip the Joker of caricature and rebuild him from the ground up. Younger actors cited him as inspiration to take risks, to prioritize integrity over image. Directors admired his willingness to surrender control, to find truth through vulnerability. His name became synonymous with artistic courage. And yet, behind the legend, there remains the memory of a young man who simply wanted to create, to feel, to understand. He never sought immortality, but in giving everything to his art, he found it. Even now, watching Heath Ledger's performances feels like witnessing someone uncovering a hidden part of the human soul. His characters breathe, ache, and burn with authenticity. There's a timelessness to them, as if he tapped into something universal. The quiet pain, the joy, the confusion that defines being alive. His death was a tragedy, but his work endures as a celebration of the human spirit. Every frame, every gesture carries the fingerprint of an artist who refused to compromise. Heath once said he didn't want to be remembered for a single role, but for the honesty he brought to all of them. And he is. His story reminds us that art can outlive the artist, that even the briefest lives can leave infinite echoes. Heath Ledger's legacy is more than the films he made. It's the philosophy he lived by. He showed that art is not about perfection, but about truth. He believed that fear was a necessary part of creation, that only by confronting it could one produce something real. His life teaches us that greatness often exists in the tension between light and darkness, between control and surrender. Through every performance, he left a piece of himself behind, not for fame, but for connection. And in that connection, he achieved what he always sought: honesty. He may have left this world too soon, but the resonance of his work continues to inspire artists, dreamers, and storytellers everywhere. In the end, Heath Ledger didn't just act in films. He became part of cinema's heartbeat, a pulse that will never fade, a reminder that true art. Even in the years before fame, Heath Ledger's curiosity was never confined to acting alone. Those who knew him in Perth remember him as a boy with boundless imagination, building stories, staging little plays, drawing, and dreaming of worlds beyond the horizon. Acting wasn't just a career path, it was an outlet for understanding emotion and existence. He often said that the camera gave him a kind of truth that ordinary life sometimes couldn't. When he performed, it was as though he was translating the chaos of feeling into something beautiful and tangible. This perspective would define the rest of his journey, a belief that art was not about performance but revelation. As his fame grew, Ledger remained wary of the machinery of Hollywood. He saw the industry as both an opportunity and a trap, a place where creativity could thrive or be crushed by repetition. While many around him were chasing roles that promised wealth and visibility, Heath sought meaning. He would turn down major studio offers if they didn't resonate with him emotionally. Friends recalled that he often said he'd rather make one honest film than 10 successful lies. This philosophy guided him toward unconventional projects, and with each new performance, he stripped away more of himself, exposing raw humanity on screen. Ledger's creative process was unlike anyone else's. He treated every role as an experiment, a laboratory where psychology, instinct, and chaos coexisted. Before shooting, he would spend weeks dissecting the script, reading about philosophy and emotion, sketching the inner world of his character in notebooks. He didn't believe in pretending. He believed in becoming. On set, he could be unpredictable, playful one moment and deeply introspective the next, always chasing something real. His colleagues often said it was impossible not to be affected by his presence. There was something magnetic in the way he gave himself fully to the work. Off-screen, Heath was a filmmaker at heart. Acting was just one branch of his creativity. He was constantly experimenting with cinematography and editing, fascinated by how images could convey mood without words. His short films, some unfinished, others shared privately among friends, revealed an artist deeply attuned to rhythm and tone. He envisioned a future behind the camera, where he could tell stories from his own perspective. He had started working on a music video collective and had ideas for original features that explored surrealism, dreams, and the subconscious. His friends often spoke of how passionate he was about directing, describing him as a visionary in the making. Even his downtime was filled with creation. His Brooklyn apartment was a reflection of his mind. Books on art, walls covered in sketches, a piano, a camera always nearby. He surrounded himself with people who inspired him, from musicians and painters to poets and photographers. He thrived in collaboration, but guarded his solitude fiercely. Heath believed that art came from honesty, and honesty required stillness. Despite the image of him as a carefree star, he was a deeply reflective soul, often wrestling with his own emotions and thoughts late into the night. His insomnia became both a curse and a source of creativity, giving him time to think, to write, to imagine. When he stepped into the role of the Joker, he was not just playing a villain. He was confronting the darker corners of human nature. He researched psychology, chaos theory, and the philosophy of nihilism, seeking to understand what it meant to live without limits or empathy. His Joker was not evil for the sake of evil. He was a mirror to society's hidden madness. Ledger once said that he wanted the character to feel real enough to unsettle people long after the credits rolled. And he succeeded. His transformation was total, unsettling even to those closest to him. Yet behind that intensity was a man who loved deeply. His daughter, Matilda, was the anchor that grounded him. Every photo of him with her reveals a softness, the light that balanced his darkness. Friends often said that fatherhood brought out the best in him, giving him joy and perspective amid the storm of his career. He often said that being her father was the greatest role he'd ever have. It reminded him that art, no matter how powerful, was still only a reflection of what mattered most: connection, love, and humanity. After his passing, those close to Heath shared stories that painted a picture of a man constantly seeking balance between creation and peace, ambition and simplicity. He had been planning to direct his own films, produce music videos, and take time off to be with family. His death felt like the abrupt end of a symphony that had only just reached its most powerful note. But in truth, Heath Ledger's influence did not end there. His artistry continued to ripple outward, shaping a new generation of performers who saw vulnerability not as weakness, but as strength. Actors today still speak of his impact, the way he made it acceptable to take risks, to defy conventions, to embrace imperfection. Directors reference his work as a turning point for realism in modern cinema. The Joker became more than a character. It became a cultural symbol of duality: order and chaos, sanity and madness, light and shadow. And within that performance lies the essence of Heath Ledger's philosophy: that truth is rarely neat, that beauty and darkness coexist, and that the artist's job is to explore that fragile balance. Beyond his roles, Ledger's personality left a mark on everyone he met. He had a contagious laugh, a playful nature that made people feel alive around him. He loved to dance, to surf, to live spontaneously. He had an openness that drew people in, yet a mystery that kept them fascinated. Those who knew him speak of moments of pure authenticity: a look, a gesture, a conversation about art at 3 a.m. He made others believe that creativity was sacred, something to be protected and pursued with heart. That is perhaps his greatest legacy, not just the performances, but the spirit of artistic integrity he embodied. Even years after his passing, the world continues to celebrate Heath Ledger not as a tragedy, but as a triumph of art and humanity. His work lives in the hearts of audiences who still feel the electricity of his presence. When people watch his films today, they don't just see an actor. They see a man who dared to live truthfully through his art. His story reminds us that life's measure isn't its length, but its depth. Heath Ledger's name has become synonymous with artistic courage, authenticity, and the relentless pursuit of truth. He showed that the greatest roles are not played, but lived, and that even in silence, the echo of a true artist never fades.